She thought spike strips would break him. Instead, they ignited a war. Malik's tires hissed like dying snakes as his car limped onto his driveway, the rubber shredded by Karen's handiwork. She stood across the street, smirking, her phone raised to capture his reaction for her neighborhood gossip group. For months, she'd waged a silent campaign against him, petty complaints about his music, his late-night jogs, the way his laughter carried too loudly through their cul-de-sac. But this was sabotage, pure and venomous. The spike strips weren't just metal. They were her manifesto, a scream of entitlement etched into his pavement. Malik's fists clenched, his breath shallow, as he surveyed the damage. His car, his pride, the one he'd saved for years to buy, was now a wounded beast, sagging on its rims. Karen had always been a storm cloud in human form. Ever since Malik moved into the neighborhood, her eyes followed him like a hawk tracking prey. It started small notes on his windshield about proper parking, calls to the HOA about his unkempt lawn, which was just a few dandelions. Then came the whispers to neighbors, painting him as a threat, a disruption to their manicured peace. Malik, a graphic designer who worked late and loved his morning runs, ignored her at first. He'd dealt with Karens before. But this wasn't just passive aggression anymore. This was a calculated strike, and the whole street was watching, some with pity, others with quiet glee. The tension boiled as Malik stepped toward her, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. "You think this is a game, Karen? You think you can ruin my life and film it for likes?" Her smirk faltered, but she doubled down, her voice dripping with fake innocence. "I was protecting the neighborhood. Your reckless driving's a danger to us all." The lie was so bold it almost sparkled. Malik hadn't spent a day in his life. The crowd murmured, phones now out, turning their quiet street into a coliseum. Karen's husband, Greg, hovered behind her, muttering about escalation, but she waved him off. This was her stage, and she was the star. Malik's heart pounded, but he wasn't about to let her win. He'd spent years building a life here, proving he belonged despite the sideways glances. If Karen wanted war, he'd fight smarter. He turned to the crowd, his voice steady but loud. "Y'all see this? She put spikes on my driveway because she doesn't like me existing here. Who's next? Your dog? Your kids' bikes?" The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some nodding, others looking away. Karen's face reddened, her phone lowering slightly. Malik wasn't just calling her out. He was rewriting her narrative. The counterattack came swiftly. Malik didn't touch her, didn't need to. He pulled out his own phone, live streaming to the same neighborhood group she'd weaponized. "This is what hate looks like," he said, panning to the spike strips, then to Karen's frozen expression. "She thought she'd humiliate me, but she's showing you who she is." Comments flooded in's hoc, support, a few ugly defenses of Karen. But the tide was turning. Neighbors who'd stayed silent now spoke up, recounting her other crusades. The time she'd reported a kid's lemonade stand, or harassed the elderly couple for their tacky Christmas lights. Malik's words were a spark, and the neighborhood was dry tinder. Karen tried to rally, shouting about property values and safety, but her voice cracked, her authority crumbling. Greg tugged at her arm, whispering, "Let's go," but she yanked free, desperate to reclaim control. That's when Malik dropped the final blow. He'd already called the police, filed a vandalism report, and sent the HOA evidence of her sabotage, including security footage from his doorbell camera. Karen's face drained of color as sirens wailed in the distance. The crowd parted, phones still recording, as two officers approached. They didn't cuff her, but the weight of their questions pinned her in place. The aftermath was brutal in its quiet way. Karen's spike strips didn't just puncture Malik's tires. They tore open her own life. The HOA banned her from the board. Neighbors shunned her, their whispers now aimed at her. Malik's car was repaired, paid for by Karen's settlement after he pressed charges. He didn't gloat, didn't need to. He'd won by exposing her, by refusing to shrink. But the victory was hollow. Driving past her house, he saw her curtains drawn, her yard unkempt, her world smaller. He'd fought for his place here, but at what cost? The neighborhood was quieter now, but the scars of her hate lingered, a reminder that belonging was a battle he'd have to keep fighting. And that truth, sharp as any spike, cut deeper than he'd ever admit.